At eRoad, we believe fleet management doesn't have to be problematic. It should be effortless, connected, and future-ready for your heavy-duty operation. With a reliable, accurate technology solution, you can elevate your fleet's performance, improve productivity across your business, monitor events as they happen, and reduce costs and downtime. Get on the road to better fleet management and safer, more productive operations. Go beyond the basics and visit eroad.com today.
Welcome to Running on Ice, the coolest community in freight. I'm your host, Mary O'Connell, bringing you the latest tech updates, warehouse news, and everything happening in the cold chain world. Not only is there the coolest show in freight, but there's also Running on Ice, the newsletter that could not be colder. You can subscribe to that on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. Today, we welcome, I think for the first time, I was checking my notes, and I think this is the first time we can welcome Thomas Wasson, enterprise trucking expert here at FreightWaves. Hello, Thomas. Welcome.
Boom. First time for everything. Actually, I will tell you the first and the other time I showed up on Running on Ice, it is a long lost episode where we did a test one. I was in a booth with Sydney Edwards, and we talked about Chuck E. Cheese, pizza, and the cold chain. So there is a hidden episode somewhere. That was the only time. So not officially. So it's good to be on officially.
I mean, look, RIP. I mean, Sydney didn't die. She's just left the cold chain world, but she started the show where we have to remember the fallen soldiers.
All right, we're pouring one out verbally right now, but you know it's great to be on the show because I mean it's such a fun show. You get to talk about some cool stuff. You know, sometimes with trucking in my communities, like people like brake pads, but you know it's not as cool as like life-saving medicine and like shipping things in drones. So I'm really excited. Say,
I do love check call and I do love Running on Ice, but Running on Ice does generally tend to find some cooler things because, you know, we love a good freight brokerage. We love a good story in that area, but Running on Ice definitely, I think, holds the edge a little bit for just like cool and interesting stuff because, man, some of the medical stuff gets a little wild.
I like the sniffer ones they made that simulate. I don't know if that was you or someone I read. I swear it had to have been y'all as well. They're making little stickers they stick on the fruit pouches and they like pretend to rot. So they tell you if it's good or not, because the problem is you put it in a trailer and you can't tell if it's fresh.
Yeah.
But then you have the sticker in the pallet and it's like, oh yeah, this one's bad.
That was us.
See, that was my favorite. I tell people that's my bar trivia. So I actually get my bar trivia from Running on Ice. I'm like, hey, have you heard about the AI noses and the stickers for bananas? And people are like, no,
yeah, I think that was a couple episodes ago. We had Evigence on the show, and they have a chemistry enabled barcode that they can put on fruit that literally says like something around me is decaying too quickly for me to live in this environment. It's fast.
I need that for old people homes. You just give them like a name badge with a sticker. It's like Chernobyl or something. You know, when you get too many Radigans and it tells you, it like turns into an angry face. Like we need that. That way we don't have to have, because otherwise you hear about cats and then you have to like import cats and the cats, like some cats can smell it, but I don't know. That's more expensive than just having a sticker on them. So I think that's a good.
I think sticker technology is the way to go. But Thomas, since it's your first time, we have to get some background on you and kind of how you got started here as our enterprise trucking expert.
It was funny. I think I'm moving up in the world because my title keeps getting shorter. I'm technically an enterprise trucking expert, but now it's FreightWaves Media. I used to be an enterprise trucking carrier expert. Too much work. So here I am. I was supposed to be in the Army. I ran 2 seconds too slow in college. And that didn't work out. So I graduated in like 13 actually. I worked as a security guard. And that was my first taste of the supply chain, was this German guy talking smack about how Chinese solar silicone is horrible and that their stuff is so good they can put it in missiles. And he said, by the way, do you like our hydrochloric acid plant? I said, what? They said, yeah, we pump it in and we grow the crystals in vats of hydrochloric acid. So if this puppy ever goes up, make sure you're downwind. I'm just here. They're building it. They had to import like a German fire truck. So I did that for a year. And I met my wife, Ann. We were talking and she said, Thomas, I'm applying to this place called U.S. Express. And I was like, well, I want to get in the Navy. She's like, you're probably not. You already ran too slow in the Army. And I was like, all right, well, you know. So there's a job called a dispatcher, extended coverage. And it was on the weekends. And it paid the same as like a starting lieutenant. So I thought, well, hell, I'll just go over to this. I show up an interview, had my degree. I wore this brown suit. It looked like it was like one of those really cheap suits too, like a 70 used car salesman, where it didn't fit at all. And I had like a cream colored shirt and this brown polka dot tie. Oh, it was good. My mom picked that one out with me. And I was so nervous. And I show up and everyone's wearing jeans and their caps are backwards. I got the job, luckily. This is good. Fast forward, next thing you know, I do that for like a year, 12-hour shifts, 150 calls, probably getting your teeth kicked in with 300 trucks. And I think to myself, well, let's move up. Let's manage like team fleets. So I get to daytime, I manage some teams, and I think, well, this is cool. I did that for like a year. And I thought, well, I'm in a very corporate structure. Let's become a load planner. That sounds like fun. So I do that as a load planner. And then I realized that sucked. And so I became a freight analyst. I was like, well, let me bid on it instead of dealing with assigning trucks. That'll be easier. And I did that during like 16 and 17. It was so crazy. I got to work nights in a dual inbox and just quote FedEx and Amazon loads because they would send them nonstop because of the demand. And I would just sit there and throw out stupid money, like $6,000 for preloaded Indianapolis to Miami. And I just drop it and make it solo transit. And then the other planners during the day would get mad because I'd call drivers like, what are you doing right now? And the driver's like, I'm running this load. It's like, no, you're not. You're picking my stuff up. And I would just dunk on them. And so they get mad. I was like, look how much. So I made like $1 million to $1.5 million in revenue in 6 months. Oh, like 500 grand rip, just sitting there slinging. And they needed someone crazy enough to do it. So I listened to a lot of podcasts. And I got back on days as a FET analyst. I'm telling you the whole story. You guys are getting the whole spiel. FET is a freight eligibility tool. So I stole things from brokers because of how US Express was structured. And I tried to make sure that we captured their revenue without failing the freight. I was good at it because I knew that we would probably fail half of it, but other analysts would like really screw it up and they get so mad. So finally, this is the best part, the piece de resistance. I get offered a job. The load planners wanted me back. So they're like, let's make you a truckload network design manager. And so what I did was I was given this role. I interviewed for it, and I was like a planning manager. But also what I did was I basically looked at lane pairings and data visualization, and I tried to imagine a plumber. If your freight flows, the volume instead of water, it's trucks. And my job is to fix areas where, we kind of get clogged. So let's say we get clogged in Kansas City. So I'm going in, I'm fixing some issues there. Maybe we need an RFP coming in. Maybe a new RFP didn't work. That's kind of a problem solver. And I did that for a little bit. And then I met a guy named Mark L. Corey. He became the chief strategy officer at US Express. This is important later. But we'll hit pause on my trucking career. I got very far, and I tried so hard, but like the Linkin Park song, in the end, it didn't really matter because I unfortunately reached a zenith of my position. And I wanted to try something else. I wanted to be like a freight broker. I wanted to get kind of the logistics thing. And part of that is because of a talent stack. So I will hit the pause button right now as we digest all of this, because in the trucking part, the biggest thing was just, it's such a different animal than what most other media people don't have the experience of doing.
Right. I absolutely love that. Thomas, you have honestly probably some of the most colorful descriptions of your path leading you here. And I love it. I'm happy that you're here. I feel like I learn something new every time I talk to you because you know much more about trucks than I could ever dream of.
And it's like nerding out. So I learned all the trucks, like for Alexander Wheat, for their No More Worlds Left to Conquer. I become a broker. I go to Arrival Logistics. Sounded really fun. And then I'm moving up. I start as a carrier rep. And that sucked, by the way. You call, they'd hang up on you. The drivers would hang up on you. Like, everyone hated you. It is that type of market. And I became an account executive, and I made all the brokers mad because I was the one with the freight. Now I'm the captain. And then the customer reps would get mad. It's called a Chicago split. So I was the marriage counselor between a customer sales rep and a carrier sales rep. And then I was supposed to be the one that helped figure out their drama. And then the pandemic happened. So yours truly got laid off in April of 2020. It was cash because I got to basically not have to pay my mortgage or anything else, but I was also jobless, which sucked. And so come back to Marco Corey. I was really embarrassed, but he reached out to me on LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Wasson, how's it going? I see you're not at US Express anymore." So I try to play it cool. I'm like, "Yeah, Mark, it's going good." Didn't want to tell him I'm jobless. And he's like, "I'm working on this company. I think I'm going to call it AI Fleet." And the funny thing is, I hope Mark's watching this. I don't think we meant to call it AI Fleet. I'm pretty sure that I had a conversation with him and we're going to call it something else. But when you're busy making a company, you don't get around to changing the name. It just stays at AI Fleet. So he pulls me in, and I was a consultant, and I'd never been a consultant before, but I've worked with him. I worked with A.T. Kearney and a few other folks at U.S. Express. And it got to a point where it's like, well, Thomas, this is like October of 2020. It's like, I can't afford you anymore. Like, well, crap. So I go back to Arrive Logistics right as the flip, when it got crazy. Because in April, it died. But then by like August, this started coming back. And I had a team of 4 under me. And it's just 4 and then 2 other AEs and a ops manager. And it was just an ops manager and an AE. So that was the next guy. We got our teeth kicked. It was just so bad. And finally, Mark is like, "Hey, I got a pre-seed. You want to join?" I'm like, "Yeah. Let's check it out." So I interviewed with a guy named Tom Williams, the other cool Tom. There's a Tom Mallon who used to work at FreightWaves. He's cool Tom. There's also Tom Williams, who is Apple cool Tom. A real smart guy. He is out of San Francisco. So I interview with him, and I'm in this exact same place. And there's a little bottle of wine. I think I took the bottle down at somewhere else. But he found that, and he's like, "Tell me about this bottle." I love wine tasting, so we shoot the breeze, and I think I'm just some trucking schmuck is the funny part. And he's like, "Nah, you're cool. I tell Mark you're in. You're good. Get the job." Second or first W-2 employee at AI Fleet, which is really fun. Stressful, though, by the way, very stressful. And we do that. And I'm do that for about a year or nearly a year, but I start getting my teeth kicked in and I see this job. This is where we get to FreightWaves now. This is the whole saga. I'm taking up half the episode, but it's a fun story. You can't make it up. I'm going to put it in a book one day. And I see this job called Enterprise Truck and Carrier Expert. And don't get me wrong, I love my job. Senior Ops Manager, AI Fleet, building a company from scratch. It's fun. What I did was fun, but it also was stressful. And it said podcast and, writer. And I remember this guy called Scott Adams. He made the Dilbert cartoon, but he had a book. He used to write books before all that stuff. And it was called How to Fail at Everything and Still Win Big. and it was such a great book because I read it. And one of the key things that he talks about, he was like, I was never the best writer. I was never the best business person. I can't draw very well as a cartoonist, but I made this comic called Dilbert because I combined them all in this stack of talents. And so I get the wheels turning. I'm like, well, I wasn't the best trucking guy. You can ask anyone at U.S. Express. I wasn't always the best. I did a good job. I wasn't the best broker. I sucked at booking loads. It took me 6 weeks to book my first load. But I've been in so many roles that I had this kind of thing. I thought, well, let's do that with FreightWaves. And so I interview with JP and Zach Strickland, and this is like August, I think. Oh, no, July. And I bombed. I talk so much. It's funny now. I'm getting paid. Like what we're doing now was how I rambled during the interview. And I was like, shit, I guess I got to step it up. I guess I got to get good. So go back to the job. It's like October. They reached back out. They're like, "Hey, you still interested?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So took the job and been here over 3 years now. Yeah, I think it's October. I'm on my year 3. It has been the greatest and most craziest job in the world. I didn't come from media. You and I were functional people. We both came from very functional roles. And so here at FreightWaves, it's like a petri dish. We had to learn the hard way. And I think that's the coolest thing with my job is getting to learn this. The first year, I had no idea what I was doing. The second year, I was like, well, I can't screw this up. And the third year, I can at least look at the camera now and talk. But I do. This is the best part. Getting to do this is the coolest thing. And I think that getting to share these experiences in trucking from the outside looking in, I mean, that's what matters. That's the fun part.
I always like to say I have the weirdest job when you go to describe it to somebody that's like not in supply chain. You're like, "Oh yeah, I write about supply chain." They're like, "That's weird, but okay." And so I always say it's the weirdest job, but it's fun. You just get to talk to people.
You get to talk, and a lot of people don't have time to talk. And I remember every other job I had before this one, I was a worker bee. I would, even if I was a manager, they didn't pay me to think. They paid me to fix things. And you're very good at fixing things as well. We both were fixers. And so now it's like you can hear some things, you have the time to read it. And then people come back and say, "Dang, Thomas, thanks so much for resharing this." So I like to think of what we're doing is we're curating. We're looking for good stuff. We provide information that we think is important, and then folks will subscribe to it because I think that's kind of that's the future right now. This is like even with running on ice in the cold chain, there's not many publications that are working on this and that have kind of the backup. So it's Yeah, if you ever, I guess you ever just think of asking your past self, and you're like, what wonder what it'd be like 4 years past Thomas, be like, you'd be on a podcast right now and hanging out at home. I'd say, yeah, get out of here. But it's fun. I think getting to talk shop, if you look at it, even with the reefer and the truckload aspect, is something I really like to talk about because, we get a lot of folks. There's certain facets, but a lot of the stuff isn't focused on the day-to-day operations of what reefer carriers experience. So it's one of my fun ones, Reefer Madness.
Well, speaking of talking shop, Thomas, we actually have to talk about something more than just your origin story.
Enough
here
about
at
me.
FreightWaves. But it's something that I think I personally, as like a representative of the cold chain, which nobody has told me that it is, I just have taken it. I feel very proud of reefer rejection rates right now because they are like, hey, guess what? We're here to stay. We're here to play. And they have really risen to the top. And do you have any speculation as to like, why the reefer rejection rates have become so popular all of a sudden versus dry van? Because this is not typically a rate that we see this during this time of the year. So it's just kind of like, I don't want to say it's like unexplainable, but it is like a little asterisk that nobody really paid attention to, and reefer just slowly crept up like, surprise, we're here.
That's a fun one. Reefer, when we saw the two hurricanes, Helene and Milton, hit back to back, as well as some port strike challenges, but I think the hurricanes were the big ones. That was kind of the beginning of this out of seasonal uptick. And so for a lot of folks, we speculated that it would be the dry van segment, which saw a bump. That thank you, hurricanes, but it's really been reefer and flatbed that have managed. And there's two reasons for it. One, it's the contracted freight. Outbound tender rejections are measurements of contracted freight that doesn't typically see the spot. Because we saw rates go down in reefer, but rejections went up. Secondly, imagine it's parts of the Carolinas and Florida. You have a double whammy. The first whammy is I need cold chain things, even mobile morgues. People forget that you have to store dead bodies in a reefer trailer. Things like that are kind of the things that you'll need more demand for, especially ice. Ice shipments are a big one, perishables, water, any kind of things like that. And that's also in addition to the fact that the distribution centers are having to think of restocking stores. So we have the double whammy where we have disaster relief that spurred demand. We have restocking in terms of some refrigerated demand. And I'm going to give you a third one in this asterisk because I do think this is something that I have a theory on this, but I'm going to have to, need more time. We see that services spending is still doing okay, but looking at goods, is it something that more consumers are getting food from grocery stores, which require cold chain? Are consumers buying more frozen goods in order to save money? Because while the inflation rate has lowered, it is still on an aggregate higher. So my frozen pizza from $7.99, maybe $12.99, so it's not going to go up as much, but now I got to deal with a $12.99 pizza. So that's one of my other kind of asterisk theories. Otherwise, we would be waiting until November, December for the seasonal uptick because you can't put certain things in a dry van past a point. Think of like Colorado and other areas when I've done that before, by the way. They used to get so mad. Anheuser-Busch in Fort Collins. Oh my God. I was a load planner for Colorado and I just wouldn't pick up their stuff. And so they'd have to unload it. They'd put them in these big, sometimes they'd have them in heated areas that were temperature controlled. But other times we had to just put them into a truck. And kid you not, this is what I've been told. A poor man's reefer is a dry van who idles. They said as long as the truck idles at the truck stop and it's vibrating, it will somehow keep your crap from freezing. I didn't believe that. I always thought they threw the blankets on as well, but for managing drivers, poor man's reefer is just a dry van burning fuel. So those are a few of my ideas. I do think that the hurricanes had an impact. What we got to watch, though, is going to be, Thanksgiving's coming up. So a lot of people are shitting their turkeys and stuff. Like, is this going to be a sustained uptick? And is it going to get closer to the 20% coming up in Christmas? It has more opportunity because there's just not as many reefer carriers. It's a real pain in the neck. You got to buy a special trailer. You got to have the reefer unit. You're going to have to run certain things. You can't haul all the dry van freight because you need to be under 42.5. They'll tell you 42, but I got 42.5 out of a few reefers before. Just little things like that, it's a really promising sign. The real irony is reefers got the glow up while dry van, unfortunately, is looking a little ratchet right now.
On behalf of our West counterpart, when I worked at Anheuser-Busch, thank you for being the reason that I yelled at them, because I was that person who, why are you not picking up your stuff? It's just not going to happen.
And they
Cool.
would bundle their tenders. So the irony with Anheuser-Busch and them is like it wasn't on purpose. You just have to imagine that. Imagine that I have 8 inbound trucks into Fort Collins, and they drop 12 loads. So I'm +4 on day 1. I have 5 inbound trucks on day 2, but I'm still +4, and they send another 10. And then I keep. So it's almost like this, like I said, when your pipes get clogged, but the opposite of the pipe from the tenders is just preloaded trailers. So that was one of the things like we would try to explain, and I can't just drop out. So what we would do is what we call a terminal transfer, or a TT. We would take an inbound asset from like Cali, and the driver is excited, by the way, because they're getting miles, they're paid by the miles, and I'd crush their dreams. I'd say, drop at, this one was in Denver, so Aurora. Drop at Aurora, drop yard 1234 TW. You're now on pro number, blah, blah, blah. And we'd have to send it out, and they get so pissed. But yeah, that was kind of what we had to do from a carrier standpoint, because like you said, with the refrigerated and the reefer angle, it was real. I think one of them blew up. I don't know. Don't quote me. Some of you USS Press be like, no, I didn't. I was like, I never got that down to me. But I know if a salesperson, like a sales VP, would like be like, hey, Thomas, what happened to this load? I'm like, I don't know. There's like thousands of loads. I see them all the time. What are you talking about? And they're like, this one blew up. And I'm like, not my problem.
Oh man. I do know that, fun fact for anyone out there, Anheuser-Busch is my first experience into the reefer market, because a keg of beer, according to their quality standards, cannot be outside of a temperature controlled environment for greater than 6 hours. Otherwise it's considered at risk. It needs to be temped and tapped and all that. And yeah, because that was you could technically put a keg of beer on a dry van, but only if it was going like under 200 miles. And if they got stuck in traffic, it was a nightmare. So it was really fun to do that in Boston, where there's
and that's hard too, because think of Fort Collins. You go 200 miles, you're like at Junction City.
Yeah.
You're in the middle of like nowhere. By the way, there's a Nike distribution center out of Junction City. Those buttholes, they used to steal all my trailers. Them and Goodyear and Lawton, Oklahoma, would steal my stuff. Lawton's in the middle of butt end of Oklahoma. So I'd have to deadhead trucks, and I'd waste hundreds of miles in deadhead because you'd reposition assets. Oh yeah, no, if you ever want a fun time, the real tell if your market is good is if you have trailers, the velocity and movement of trailers. But speaking of trailers, the reefer ones, that's one of the biggest challenges, is also the reefer trailers, keeping them fueled. If fuel prices are high, that's another big problem. Making sure the reefer temperatures are correct, that's another issue, because a lot of times the reefer itself does not make it colder. If you think that's going to cool down your stuff, no, that's the warehouse. You are simply keeping it at a stable enough temperature to not die from point A to point B. That was always my favorite thing selling reefer loads, is ice cream. Ice cream, man. Because it would always happen. Like one side would melt, the other side was frozen solid. They try to blame me, and it's like, no, it's your fault because you staged it at the front and just, oh, yeah. So I have a shout out to the cold chain folks, and I think that's why you get all these interviews with the temperature control modules and stuff, because shippers get really smart, and if the shipper is having issues, they'll try to push it off on the carrier to avoid the cargo claims and the liability. It was a hustle. They call it hustling freight.
Yeah, and that's my biggest fun fact to drop on people, is that reefer units don't actually keep your freight. They don't cool down your freight. They just keep it at the temperature it's already at. And a lot of people don't always remember that fun fact.
Oh no, not at all. And they expect it. They think it's magic. Same with steel coils. Customers, I think one of the best parts of our job is explaining to other people in the supply chain that it is actually different than what you think it is, because everyone's so siloed. Transportation manager, demand planning, they don't talk to each other half the time. And then think of the demand planning on the truckload side and the people who are accepting loads or making the agreement. So it's like, it's this weird game of telephone. That was what my network design job was. This is the exact same thing that reefers and dry vans struggle with, is, how do you plan to have everyone have a load? We used to joke, though, you got 2 loads in one truck, and you didn't tell the customer that you weren't going to pick one up. We call that captured revenue. So I used to do that at Fort Collins as well. Because you're not going to unload it. It's my trailer now. Never had any. I've had them do it when I was a broker. They've unloaded it, but maybe once or twice. But normally you can get an extra day or two not picking it up. I do.
Just, forever finding ways just to skirt around those rules. And I love that, Thomas. But we are running a little bit out of time today, but that doesn't mean that you get out of the number one question that we ask everyone that comes on the show. Thomas, are you ready for possibly the hardest question you'll be asked all day today?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Is cereal considered a soup?
Ooh. You know what? My heart says yes, but my mind says no, because there's probably a doctrinal term, because the cereal in and of itself is the milled stuff in the milk, but the properties of making a soup would imply that maybe heating or some other things. So maybe in the process of making the cereal, it becomes a soup, but through transubstantiation, at the time of pouring it into the bowl, it remains a cereal. Because I feel like the soup aspect has to require the combination of heat and other stuff.
That's a first. That's a first. I've not quite heard that reasoning before. So Thomas, if someone wants to, follow up on your transubstantiation soup, or if they want to pick your mind on, other indicators to keep out for in the reefer market, or if they want to subscribe to Loaded and Rolling, where can they find you outside the show?
Yeah, check it out. It's freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. We've got the live show Tuesdays, 2 p.m. Eastern. And then on Thursdays, the newsletter comes out. That's right, I write a newsletter, 2 p.m. Eastern as well. Check it out. Or Google Thomas Wasson. I write some sponsored content. You may learn a thing or two as well.
I absolutely love that. Thomas Wasson here, dropping knowledge bombs left and right. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
You can catch other episodes of Running on Ice right here on FreightWaves TV, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Need more Running on Ice news? No sweat. Subscribe to the newsletter on freightwaves.com/runningonIce. See you on the internet.